Welcome to A Taste of AZ podcast. My name is Luke Irvin, and today we've got an epic episode lined up for you. But before we jump into that, just want to let you guys know real quick, we've got some brand new merchandise up on our website, including these Thanks for Supporting Local hats and 2 new shirts as well. If you like today's episode, please also leave us a review on your favorite podcast app, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow our email newsletter. With nothing else to say, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, A Taste of AZ listeners. I am one of your hosts today, along with our wonderful writer, Christina Barueta, and we are in a kind of a hidden speakeasy that's not so hidden if you are in the know, and we are with our guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Kyla Hein. I'm the operating owner here and also the beverage director. So I oversee the Pigtails concepts, Rough Rider, and our newest concept, Coabana, as well.
And so today we're at Pigtails at Desert Ridge. You have another one in downtown Phoenix, correct?
Yes, right in the heart of Cityscape.
And that's right where your new concept is as well.
Correct. They share a wall.
And so what is Pigtails exactly?
So Pigtails was started as the cocktail sister to the Whining Pig, which is just beer and wine. There are now 5 under our umbrella all over the valley, And they opened their first cocktail concept. I wasn't with the company when they opened, but it's going to be 4 years this December that it's been open. I joined about 3 months after they opened. But it's basically just a casual vibe, just like the Whining Pig, where it's all about kind of a comfortable neighborhood feel, come as you are, but you get really awesome service, really amazing cocktails, really delicious small bites. So we like to think of it as a casual but very well done environment.
Well, and if you are a fan of craft beer in Arizona, there's a good chance that you've been to a Whining Pig before. You guys have how many different locations of the Whining Pig?
So we have 5. There was originally 7. We did just close our Arcadia location, and then we sold the one on Bethany Home. So we don't actually own that one anymore, but there are still 5 left. There's Ahwatukee, Chandler, Downtown, McDowell Mountain, and then the one attached to where we are now, the Desert Ridge location.
Yes. And this location, if people came looking for, if they didn't know this bar was here, what do you think? Do they overlook it? Is it hard to find?
Yeah, I would say it's really funny to watch. So basically the way the layout is you walk down the stairs and then you see like a little patio and then you walk in and then you're inside the Whining Pig. And then let's say that you're like, hey, I'm going to have a beer here. And then you get up to go use the restrooms. Then you walk down a dark hallway and you pass 1 bathroom, then 2 bathrooms, and then a weird hallway, and then a 3rd bathroom. So we get a lot of people going towards the 3rd bathroom, and I see them like back up a few steps and then like slowly walk down the hallway and like creep inside. I'm like, what is this? Because we have the big, beautiful plant wall. Yeah, the big plant wall, big, beautiful bar, like big wooden walls. So it's definitely dark and dusty compared to the Whining Pig, which is bright and open.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because it is dark back here, but it's not so dark that you wouldn't know that something is going on. You wouldn't just think there's like a broom closet at the end of the hall.
And that, I think, too, having that really lush back wall is so eye-catching. So when people come in, I think you almost see that first, and then you see the comfortable seating and the library of books and all the things that contribute to the cozy atmosphere here.
It's definitely a focal point, that plant wall. That's for sure.
Yes, well, and so we are in the lounges on what would be, I think, the south side, right? And the plant wall is on the opposite side, so you, of course, can't see it on camera right now, but it spans, like, almost the entire opposite wall. And the way that it's lit with the cool lighting on that, but everything else has kind of the warmer lighting, it feels like it's a piece of outdoors, even though, of course, we are underground, very much so, no windows in here. But it doesn't feel like a room with no windows.
Yeah, it doesn't feel enclosed.
Exactly.
It feels, which is kind of funny. With no windows, it feels almost airy.
Sure. Well, and I think the high ceilings definitely help with that as well. And yeah, just looking around, it's a wonderfully designed space because you look over in like what would be the east wall, if my directions are serving me proper. But by the entrance is where you have all the bottles there, and it's just the beautiful floating shelves and so many different bottles. Let's talk about that a little bit. We have a few of them right here, but you have a pretty expansive selection program in terms of getting, what are they, private barrels? Is that what you would call them?
Yep, exactly. So we've curated our own private barrel list over the past 3 years. And we have everything from different types of whiskeys to some rums, some tequilas. We have a private barrel of cachaça available. So we have a lot of really awesome buyers that come in. We do a lot of events based on our private barrels or even just whiskey in general. We have a huge clientele for that particular spirit. But it's definitely a program that we've truly enjoyed building because we get to try so many cool and unique things. And
I was
you know,
going to ask you, how do you choose your barrels?
Yeah, so a lot of people will just let us know, like, hey, there's a private barrel that just came out. Would you like to try it? And so we'll say sure, and then they'll show up with anywhere from 3 to like 8 samples. And then I have my partner Rob, who I work with, and he manages that entire program. We are just about to launch our online retail shop as well.
Oh, nice.
So he's working on that as we speak. And so we sit down together and we always taste blind. So for example, if there's something on the front of the bottles that says like the age statement or the proof or any like fun fact about it, we turn them around so we can't see them because your mind tastes before you do. So like knowing myself, knowing that it was a certain age or a certain proof that I know I would enjoy, I would most likely pick that one before I even tried it.
Sure.
So we taste completely blind. And then we just base everything off of our notes. And then we pick whatever. Actually, it's funny. It's a funny process for me because I always have 2 that I pick. The one that I personally enjoy and the one that I know our general public will enjoy.
Sure.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
usually
that makes
not
sense.
the same.
Right.
And I'll tell you a funny story, actually. So I tested this theory out. So our very first private barrel was a Whistle Pig 10-year. Same thing. I knew what I would like, but I have a very different palate, not better or worse, just very different as far as like my taste goes and what I personally enjoy versus what the general public enjoys. Again, not that one's better or worse, it's just different, you know.
How would you describe the difference if you could put words to it?
Sure. So for example, like what I would have picked would be like a very like toasty, grainy, vegetal kind of flavor profile that's a lot brighter. Like I love...
Are we talking whiskey?
Yes.
Okay.
Specifically with like Whistle Pig, right? So a lot of Canadian rye, which is like their base, has like really cool fresh lemon notes to it, or a lot of like fresh grapefruit, and it's very citrusy. And you can get some that are very green, almost like a fresh piece of hay or something. And that's what I like. But then I picked one that tasted like dark cherry and lots of baking spice and like toasted cinnamon and oak and all these flavors that I know are what most people look for when they're buying whiskey.
Sure.
And we sold out of that in like 2 months.
Wow.
So then, so then the next one, we did another one, and I was like, I'm going to pick the one that I like, which was exactly those flavor profiles that I described, and like no one liked it.
Really?
I had some of like my nerdy buyers that were like, man, this is really cool and unique. And like they bought it, but otherwise like it did not sell like the first one because it just wasn't what people typically
you took
enjoyed.
it home.
So then I drank a lot of it myself. Yeah. Then, someone had to do it. It was a tough job. But overall, yeah, so that's been a proven theory. So I always have one where it's like, this is my favorite, this is what I would drink, but this is the one that the general public will enjoy. So then that's kind of how we pick based on that.
It's funny. So Eric, who is not here, and I don't think you've met him, he is my co-publisher of A Taste of AZ. And he had they weren't old beers, but they were beers that I could tell that they're not his style of beers. I know what he likes to drink. And so he gave them to me. And so they were sitting in my fridge for a little bit. And it was just the other night, I was wrapping up the night and kind of wanted something more to drink, but I didn't want to pour like a glass of whiskey or open one of the beers that I didn't want to drink the whole thing of. And so I opened this bottle, poured a little bit of it, and I was like, I thought I was just going to sip this and end up throwing it away because I didn't want to drink any of it because it's not my style. It was absolutely fantastic. And I fished the bottle cap out of the trash so I could put it back on and hope that it would save carbonation.
So you could see
well, because I didn't want to end up wasting it because it was not what I would typically get. But that's one of the reasons why it's cool to come to a spot like this and have people curating those selections, because they get to not only, make sure that you have quality stuff available here, but kind of walk you through, this one's going to be tasting this way and guide you a little bit, as opposed to just going to Total Wine and you've got 1,000 different things to select from.
And that's helpful too, because now I know I can come in, because I'm tend towards the nerdy, really unique stuff, and ask, so somebody, if you were working, I'm sure you oversee so many places now, but somebody could come in and say, hey, what is your personal favorite this week? Or
Yeah, and I think that's what's really great about the program too, is that we now have so many bottles that we really do just have something for everyone. And what's cool too is that we focus so heavily on education. So like we're constantly educating our staff on what we're buying and where it's from and what's cool about it. And then so that way, you know, I'm usually not here at night, but you could come in, and the way that I would describe a bottle is exactly how someone would describe a bottle when you were here. But what's really cool too is that me personally, this is one of my favorite things to do, is just to, instead of like leading people, kind of let them lead and create that personal experience like tailored to whatever they're looking for. So if you came in and you're like, hey, you know, I usually drink really nerdy flavors, like what do you have? And I would say, let me just pour you something. And I would leave and I would come back with something without the bottle and make you taste it blindly. And then I would tell you what it is. And then if you didn't like it, I would sample you on something else. I mean,
so it's an educational experience.
It is, absolutely. And it's like, we're not afraid to pour samples, because at the end of the day, you know, it's like what you said about Total Wine, you know, not to like shit on Total Wine, but you don't really get to taste what it is. And so you're not really willing to take that risk. You know, some of our bottles get up to $125, and it's like, you want to sample it before you buy it? Like, absolutely. It's a big purchase, and we don't want you to go home and, you know, try to give it to somebody else because you don't want it, or, you know, anything that would make it seem like it's unwanted. We want people to buy it that are going to drink it and enjoy it, because it's meant to be enjoyed as a part of that experience, you know?
So we haven't even begun to talk about the cocktails yet, and I want to put that aside for a little bit, because being that you guys are like a cocktail bar and, you know, referred to as a speakeasy, I feel like it doesn't get recognized as much, what you're talking about, the curation of bottles. And I imagine a lot of these private selections that you guys have are available for people to just enjoy a glass while they're here as well, even if they're not a big cocktail person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something else that we do differently is we actually tend to program some of ours as well. Like some of the ones that like we at first didn't really want to program them in cocktails, because we didn't want them to take away from how they're normally enjoyed, which is like neat or on a cube or anything like that, and take away from the really cool, unique flavors that they have on their own.
Sure.
But we've started realizing that because they are private barrels and because they're so unique, that they really do lend themselves to make a really cool, interesting cocktail. And that in itself is unique as well, because it's a cocktail you can't get anywhere else. Even if it's, let's say, a simple Manhattan and it's the same recipe as somebody else uses, it's still not the same because it's our private barrel. So it's still something unique that we can offer here.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really cool about private barrels, that if you're not like a big whiskey connoisseur, you wouldn't really, you know the difference in expressions, and you kind of have to develop a palate for sure. But before we started the podcast, Christine and I were talking about Del Bach's new release, and I'm not even going to try and say the barrels that it's aged in. Christina, would you mind saying
Pinot de Charentes, that French kind of...
Yeah, Pinot de Charente, that stuff's amazing. Yeah.
So I don't even know what that is. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. But this new release, it is, I want to say it's above 50%. So it's definitely like a higher proof, but it has so much nuance in it. It has like definitely tobacco flavor, and like almost, you know, when you have a good old leather wallet, how it smells like that, like almost like how I imagine this couch might smell if it were like 200 years old. But it also had like real campfire notes, even more so than I would say that their normal stuff has. And like a hot toddy or something with that sounds like unbelievable. So simple, but you know, that's something that maybe you do it with one pour of one of the fancy glasses you get when you bring it home, because you're never going to have a hot toddy like that again, because it's, you know, a very limited release, and they're probably never going to do that type of aging again. And I think that's one of the coolest things about private release barrels, is getting to try nuanced versions or just slightly different versions of a whiskey that you like so much.
And then what I think is interesting here is, along those lines, you were telling me about this new rum from Peru. So I'm super intrigued if you can expand on this one.
Yeah, so Plantation is one of my favorite brands. I am a huge rum drinker. And so when they started doing private barrels of Plantation, I was super intrigued as well, you know, because doing a private barrel of theirs is so interesting, because usually their bottles are all different blends from different islands. So I'm like, how are they going to do single barrels? But what they do is they do single origin bottles. So it's essentially all from one island instead of their normal SKUs, which are a blend of like Guyana, Trinidad, and all those kinds of places. So our first one was a 100% Panamanian one. That one sold out very quickly. And to be honest, it's one of the best rums I've ever had. Wow. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but it was incredible. The one that's on the table here is a 100% Peruvian rum. So it's aged for 10 years in bourbon casks, and then it's sent to their main distillery in France where they make Pierre Ferrand cognac because they're owned by the same company. And then it's aged in cognac as well.
Wow.
So it's a super cool, unique bottle. This one particularly to me tastes like wildflower honey, which was really cool because it was definitely a lot lighter than our previous rum. And then we got another Panamanian rum because, like I said, I was obsessed, so I had to get another one. And then we also have a single origin Australian one coming out in a couple weeks from them.
And I'm a huge fan of their rums anyways. My first one was OFTD, and it was actually Jason Asher. We were at Undertow, and he had just gotten it in. So I always remember that was my first time trying that. And you were telling me a little bit about the name earlier.
Yeah, so I just taught a rum class to our new staff at the new spot. And
because what I thought it meant was
old-fashioned traditional dark, because that's what it says on the bottle. But in reality, it stands for, oh, fuck, that's delicious, because that's what the owner said when he tried it off the still for the first time. And he was like, well, we can't put that on a label, so I guess we'll just put old-fashioned traditional dark, which they have an old-fashioned traditional dark, so this is essentially the cask strength version of that. So they're like, yeah, whatever, we'll just put that on there. But knowing that story, I think definitely maybe enhances the flavor a little bit, knowing that the master distillers said those words.
It is really fantastically delicious. And then the next one I had after that was their pineapple one.
Yep.
It's made with the pineapple leaves and rind, is it?
Yeah, so they smoke the pineapples and then they do like a full maceration.
So it is the juiciest rum in that sense to me.
So does it have fermented pineapple juice in it, or is it like...
No, basically they make it almost like how mezcal is made, where like they smoke the agave hearts underground and then they roast them in the oven and then kind of like take almost like the whole fruit and like just push it all together and then like they soak out the juice. That's kind of how plantation is made. So it's like a full maceration, like Christina said, with like the fronds and the rinds and all that kind of stuff and the juice. So it's like not super like fibrous, but those fibers actually create a really cool, unique, like creamy mouthfeel texture to it. Just like a lot of like mezcals or even like some tequilas where they use like a more old-fashioned tradition where you get a lot of those fibers actually seeping into the distillate itself. Then they kind of like expand and make it almost like a fuller bodied distillate, which is really cool.
So your level of spirits, your level of understanding with spirits and cocktails and whatnot is like far beyond anywhere that I will ever reach. How did that begin? How did you get into enjoying these types of things and learning about them?
It kind of just happened for me. You know, I fell in love with just the hospitality industry in general as a server, where I just loved taking care of people. When I worked at Market Street Kitchen up north, which is where I met Christina. My old boss used to say that it's like, we want people to make them feel like they're in your home. And that really like resonated with me, right? So I just really loved being able to create really cool experiences with people to where they were like, man, this was an awesome experience. Like that word, you know, just like kept saying to myself and kept hearing. And it was like, that's for me, like what it's all about. And still to this day is what it's all about for me. But
I might have to do a throwback Thursday reel of some of your cocktails that you invented back then.
Yes.
That's pretty funny that you have like, if I need a certain moment of my life documented and I'm with Christina, I guarantee you I can be like, hey, what was the third dish that we had on September of 2018? She's like, oh, it was this. And she'll have a photo of it as well.
Well, and it's nicer for me because I don't like to take pictures of myself.
Sure.
So if it involves anybody in the industry that I love, I will probably have a picture or video of
Yeah, you'll probably have a video of them describing what it is
like
as
Luke
well.
eating a big sandwich. Or
You could make a pretty incredible like scrapbook of all the places that you've been. You should do, you know how they have like, it's like a photo that is built out of all sorts of different photos.
Right,
you could do one of those of something. I don't know.
Except if I did a weekly one, it would be too many, I think, right there.
Sure.
But I do have some great cocktails. And I feel like back then you were, which is why she's such a aficionado of rum too, you were really exploring tiki drinks.
Yeah, so that's actually where it all started for me. So when I started bartending at Market Street, they had this really cool cocktail menu that was way beyond my expertise at the time.
Shout out to Garrett.
Yes. Yep. Shout out to Garrett. Because I had no idea what I was doing, and he was pretty patient for the most part, you know. And but around that same time was when Luc Detraz was actually teaching classes at Southern for the Academy of Spirits, they called it. And so they started hosting all these really cool classes, and that's where I started going. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. Like, my first class was a Scotch class. And at the time I was like, oh, Scotch is gross. It's all smoky and nasty and all that kind of stuff. But then it's like, once you sat there and you're like listening to somebody talk about the history of Scotch, how it's made, the culture behind it, it tastes like you're drinking a totally different spirit. And it was almost like I had like never had Scotch before until that moment. I know that's like kind of cheesy to say, but it just tasted like something totally different while I was listening to somebody talk about all of those things, because it really does lend itself to tasting with an experience attached to it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So like Christina said, so then when I was like, wow, I just really want to start learning about cocktails. And at the time, Garrett had just gotten really into tiki cocktails. So I bought every tiki cocktail book that I could possibly find, Smuggler's Cove, just whatever random ones I could find on Amazon at the time. And what I would do is I would write the original recipe on one side of my notebook, draw a line, and then I would use that as like a template. And then I would start to build my own based on that template, because that's kind of how all cocktail building starts, is you find like a template that's built out for that reason, right? It's the perfect balance of citrus, sweet, base spirit, modifiers, bitters. It's a perfect template. And so then you just kind of take that template and make it your own while trying to keep those same flavors balanced, you know?
She makes it sound easy, but her cocktails were spectacular, because then I ended up getting to judge when you started competing, and her that, you know, like she said, she just takes a template, but she has such finesse and grace and sophistication with her cocktails. They were just always killer.
Well, and it's interesting too, because
Thank you for that, by the way.
it's interesting because when you're making food at home, right? Like if let's say you're making a pizza and you get, just regular Parmesan, as they call it, that's not like a true Parmigiano Reggiano, and then you put that against a pizza that is using the true highest quality version of it, that totally changes how a pizza tastes. Everything about it almost is affected because it all plays off each other. The salt of a certain cheese is going to bring out a sweetness of a certain sauce. With cocktails, I feel like people don't really recognize the level that also plays into it, because, a lot of people, I would feel like, if you took 1,000 people, most of them would, know about maybe a few different vodkas, a few different whiskeys, but they don't really know the differences in taste or how they're made and things like that. When I've tried to make a cocktail at home and I'll use one grenadine versus another, I'm like, this tastes like absolute garbage. And so that's kind of what you're talking about, is taking that model and switching out different ingredients, different brands and things like that. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really like, I'm glad that you said like when you're making cocktails at home too, because I think what a lot of people don't understand, but maybe just something that's not really talked about a lot, is like everything should be enjoyed the way you would want to enjoy it, right? It's like, I remember when I was working here in the very beginning, and I had a bartender that was like super into whiskey, and he came up to me when I was managing at the time, and he was like, hey, this guy wants to order like a Pappy 10-year with Coke. And I was like, okay. And he was like, we can't do that, right? And I was like, why? And he was like, because, that whiskey is just like super high end and allocated. And I was like, who cares? That's how he wants to enjoy it. Who are we to tell this guy like that he's uncultured because he wants to put Coke in his whiskey? I
really love that.
You know what I mean?
I'm a big proponent of that, to not intimidate people or, switch them to what you would prefer, because it's about enjoyment.
Exactly. And, I will say that when it comes to like the cocktails on our menu, for example, like if you wanted to take, let's say, the Holy Melon Balls Batman, which is basically a melon ball with St. George green chili. And it's a very simple drink, but it's very good. And if you wanted to switch it out for Tito's, like we would say respectfully no, only because it's built around that base spirit that we chose. And so the cocktail would essentially lose its quality. But we would be more than happy to make you something similar. It just won't be the same drink. So I will say that we definitely don't allow substitutions with our cocktails that we make on the menu, only because we spend so much time curating them, and they are all based around the idea to showcase that base spirit.
Sure.
But we definitely would never say like, oh, we're not going to put Tito's in here. We're like, sure, if you want a melon ball with Tito's, like absolutely, we'd love to make that for you. And we'll make it the best melon ball that you possibly have ever had with Tito's. You know what I mean? So
I'm sure the cocktail is fantastic, but I might be more impressed that you said Holy Melon Balls Batman without even so much as smirking.
Now we really want to know the name development.
Yes.
Selfishly, that was my drink. I actually made that drink 3 years ago. So we have a section on our menu called the favorites and throwbacks. So we keep the top 5 selling drinks from the previous menu whenever we roll out a new one. And that drink has made it into the top 5 the past 3 years. We're actually taking it off the menu, even though it's still in the top 5, just because I want to give that space to somebody else.
So how long do we have before that gets taken off?
Well, we
the
can
menu?
always make it. We can always make it.
Oh, really?
Yep. So if you come back and you're like, man, I really wanted that drink, the Holy Melon Balls Batman, it's like, we still have St. George Green Chili. It's actually, I'm not a huge vodka drinker, but that is one of my favorite.
It's so unique, and that's why I can
it's
see
so fresh. I love
what
it.
she was saying. In that instance, if you took it out, it's like taking out one of the most flavorful ingredients in a recipe.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, and to that end, too, it's like going to a pizza restaurant to continue that analogy and being like, oh, can you just switch this brand of cheese out for this brand of cheese? And it's like,
exactly.
It's not
it's
that
like,
simple.
Yeah, it's like, no, we actually spent weeks, R&Ding with this recipe, with this thing, and if we said yes and we brought it out and then they're like, wow, this drink is gross, then it's like, it's not their fault, it's our fault, right?
Sure.
We made the drink, even though, we would never be able to say that to somebody. It's like, well, you wanted to sub out Tito's, and so now the drink sucks. It's like, I would never say that to somebody.
Sure.
So instead, we just kind of cut out that, and we say, like I said, we'd be more than happy to make you something very similar. It just can't be like the same drink, and this is why. And we've never really had an issue with people. But again, just going back to the start of this conversation, where I just feel like that's something that's not really talked about, right? It's like, people want to talk about highballs. It's like, my favorite highball is made with tonic instead of soda. Like, well, it's not a real highball. It's like, well, that's how I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's not a real highball, that's fine, but that's how I enjoy it. And it's like, if you want to have your, high-end $200 bottle of whiskey and with a splash of regular Coke in there, like, who cares? You like that, and we're not, who are we to tell people that their palates are different? Because everybody's palate is different. It doesn't make anybody better
If he's
or worse.
drinking Pappy, he's doing something right.
Exactly.
Right? He's figured it out. Maybe that's
Yeah.
the key to life is.
You want to
Pappy
pay all
with
that
Coke.
money?
Yeah.
You want to pay all that money for a
Key to
drink? You can
life.
put whatever you want in there. I don't care.
I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna wake up tomorrow, and people are gonna be hitting me up. They're like, "We want to advertise. We want you to shoot photos and all that." And I'm like, "Now I know." Real quick, let's get a quick message in, and then we'll jump back into it. I have a question I want to ask you.
Sure.
Real quick message for you guys. If you guys are enjoying today's episode, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our email newsletter for all of the cool spots to eat and drink around town, as well as upcoming events and fun stuff like that. Also, we've got some brand new merch on our website, including these Thanks for Supporting Local hats and 2 brand new t-shirts. So make sure to check out our website for more. Now back to the podcast. Jumping back into it, we were talking a little bit about your cocktail program, but I do want to circle back to your background a little bit before we get too far away from that. So last we were talking, you were still at Market Street.
Yep. So I was there for almost 4 years. So started as server, and then I started working for Garrett, and then we opened up their second location in Terra Vita. And then at that point,
And a shout out to the Keeler families. I'm a huge fan of all their restaurants. They have Liberty Station Market, Keeler Steakhouse up in, I always get mixed up, Cave Creek, Carefree.
Well, and they're just good people, too.
Yeah, and they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary, and you went, right?
Oh, wow.
I did. I was there, yes.
I had
very graciously
plans,
invited.
but couldn't make it.
It was really cool. And I will say, too, that I love the Keelers. I think our kids are actually going trick-or-treating together in a couple days. But they're just really amazing people, and they definitely gave me the shot to be where I am now. So I'm very grateful for everything that they did for me. They did a lot for my family. They did a lot for me personally. And I definitely wasn't, I was definitely not ready to be a bartender. And they kind of just stuck with me during that hairy little growth period that I experienced. So I'm very grateful for that. And then shortly after we opened Terra Vita, we went to the Foodist Awards. And we actually won Best Beverage Program, which was awesome.
Wow.
Oh, that's right. I was there to that night.
Yep.
That was so exciting.
It was super cool.
I wanted to jump up and down a little bit.
I did too, but I was 8 months pregnant, so it wasn't really impossible at that point. But it was really cool. So I remember Garrett being like, "Hey, if we win, you're going to go up there with me because we did this together," and we did. So it was really cool to accept that award.
That's
it was
amazing.
me, Garrett, Matt, one of the owners, and then his dad, who's recently passed.
I'll have to add that into my throwback reels. I have a good picture of that.
I love
them
that picture. It's
accepting
so
the
good.
award.
It's so good. Oh man, that was super fun. So then shortly after that, Garrett got a job to go work at Young's, which is now RNDC. And then they offered me his job of beverage director for the company, the 2 restaurants. I was 8 months pregnant at the time. So
And this is Liberty Station and
Yep.
Market Street. Okay.
Yep. So I was beverage director, and then I had my daughter like just a few short months later in February. and then came back and continued to run their restaurants. And then I got offered a position at Taco Guild. And then at the time, they were getting ready to transition Market Street into Liberty Station. So I gave them like a month and a half and stayed through the transition and rewrote all their menus, did all their training on like the culture, because their company culture is a lot of what I model my company culture after, just really taking care of not only the staff, but really the guests and that kind of hospitality that I described earlier, where making people feel like they're at home.
Sure.
Just making them feel welcome and comfortable.
Kind of like that afternoon that we,
Yeah.
you know.
I didn't want to hijack your
Yeah,
story, but
but
we
we
were
got-
there for a shoot for Christina's Best Barbecue article. And I mean, that is probably the most hospitable anyone has ever been.
And we
I
got to
remember them
spend
telling me I'm
time
part of
with
the
Paul.
family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was an evening that I'll never forget, for sure. Because looking back on it still, I feel just so lucky to have been there. And yeah, anyways, back to your story.
No, but like that really is like such a true testament of everything that like I've been describing, you know. And to hear me talk about it is one thing, but to hear from like an outsider that has no bias is like a whole nother thing, right? And it really just solidifies, you know,
I'm
my
definitely
view.
biased now.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
definitely biased now.
Yeah, so stayed through that transition and then left to go work at Taco Guild as their beverage director.
And you made a great tapache cocktail,
Yes,
I remember.
the tapache was good. The tapache was good. I will never make tapache again because I realized that it was extremely difficult, but it's still very good, and I love tapache. So
It's like fermented.
yeah, so it just like there was really no good way to make a consistent tapache. So now I just leave it to the experts that make like tapache soda.
Well, I'm glad that we had a chance to have
Yes,
it.
and I still make it sometimes, but it's never something that I would program because of the inconsistency of it. It's just too difficult. But it is literally delicious, and I love tapache. Garrett actually used to make a sparkling hibiscus tapache that was really good.
I don't even know what half these things would taste like, but I'm like, I need a glass
You
of
would
them
love it.
ASAP. Yeah, I bet I would.
Yeah, so tapache is a drink that they make in Mexico where they take the rinds of the pineapples and they add a type of like Mexican brown sugar cane
Okay.
and a bunch of water, and they basically let it naturally ferment because there's so much yeast on the rinds of pineapples that it naturally ferments and creates like a naturally fermented soda, essentially.
That's kind of how they create prison wine, right?
Yes.
I don't
Which
mean
I
that to
think they call
sound
it.
negative, but yeah,
No,
right?
but I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, I could ramble on about like this particular topic, so I'm just going to keep it super short. But I have a theory that it's actually not a theory. It's kind of just a real thing that almost everything that has been created in the beverage world was created by accident. Like brandy, for example, you know, they made this like high proof distillate to put with the fruit so that they could ship it from one side of the world to the other, and so the fruit would make it to the journey. Then they were like, "Oh shit, this is actually really good." This, and then
I
I'm
knew
gonna get
that that's
drunk
how it
off
was
of
created,
this.
for sure.
Yes,
No, but
right?
that's like the level of knowledge that you know that weaves into the menu itself. It's pretty incredible. Because like I'm trying to just keep up with you, and I'm like, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm like, wait, what is that you were talking about there?
Yeah,
And
so
I forgot she did classes till you were talking about the rum class. I'm like, Luke, we need
Yes,
to
absolutely.
sit
Oh
in
yeah,
on
you
a
guys
few
are
of
welcome.
those.
Yeah, so I teach one class every month. I actually usually try to bring in a supplier or like a distributor to teach a certain class. Like if somebody's here from a brand, we do a lot of brand education, but overall just general education wherever we can, because I love to keep learning. And I know that for me, that was really, you asked me earlier, like what made me fall in love with this industry, and it's the learning aspect of it. It's like there's always something new to learn. Like I've taught classes now for like 3 years, and sometimes I will sit in a class that I put on, right? Like I scheduled this person to come teach this class, and I'm just kind of like standing there listening to my like 20th whiskey class, and I still hear something that I've never heard before,
Sure.
something that I've never learned before. So it's, for me, that's what not only keeps me interested, but just really keeps like my love for this craft alive.
Sure.
And so I want to give that same thing to my staff, and even for our guests, you know, like I do like actual cocktail classes for the public. So those are super fun, and it's just super casual. It's like, here's how you make it at home. I make everything in the blender. It's super easy. You know, you can go to Total Wine and get a couple ingredients, or you can just buy everything from the grocery store, you
Sure.
know? So for me, that's really what I love the most, is the learning. So like when I throw out these random fun facts, it's because that's kind of just all I do every day, is just
Sure.
randomly learn random shit on my phone.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So circling back to kind of your history, how did your time at Market Street and Liberty Station come to a finality?
So I left there to go work at Taco Guild, just to like try something new. I loved the Keelers, and I'm still super grateful for everything that they did. I think I was just young and I wanted to try something different. And Taco Guild was this big, exciting venture. You know, it was in an old church and it's a beautiful building. And it was a high volume program. It's something that I've never really done before. I mean, at Market Street, I was making my own vermouth, my own Irish cream. I was making a lot of stuff in-house because we were a small bar and a small restaurant. And so I was like, what's it like to work for something that's high volume? And it just didn't really work out for me there. I was there for only 6 months. And then I actually almost left the industry because I was just like, I just don't really know if I want to go back to bartending. I don't know if I really want to go back to, you know, I just wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I kind of went through like a little midlife crisis at that point. And then Garrett, of all people, was like, hey, I know these people that are opening this cocktail bar, and I think that it would be a really good fit for you, and I think you should go meet them. And I was like, okay. And here I am. So it happened to be these guys. And I walked in and I sat on the Whining Pig side for a while, and I was like, I don't even see a back bar here. Like, where am I? So I was late. It turns out the person who was interviewing me was late as well, so that was good for me. But then I was like, hey, I'm supposed to be meeting with somebody. And they're like, oh, are you here for Pigtails? I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, they're on the other side. And I was like, other side of what?
Yeah.
So I was that person that went all the way down and took like 3 backward steps, peeked my head in, and then walked in and was like, wow, this place is beautiful. It was not at all what I had expected.
How long ago was this?
It'll be 4 years in April.
And so was this the first Pigtails location?
Yes. It was the first cocktail concept in general for the company.
So were you familiar with Whining Pig beforehand or no?
Yeah. So actually when I was working at Four Peaks, where I worked for a really long time, I was like super into beer at the time. And the person I was seeing at the time was like, hey, no, this really cool beer spot that I think you'd really like. So we went there on a date and I was like, wow, this place is so cool. And I actually asked if they were hiring.
Oh, really?
And they said, no, we're not hiring. And I said, okay, well, keep me in mind if you guys are ever looking for anybody.
You just wait.
Yeah. So it's kind of ironic, like thinking back to that moment. But I just remember being like, man, this culture is like exactly where I would want to work. Just like super laid back. Everybody's just like having a good time. Everybody's just like chatting. But everything that they had on their board was like amazing, right? Like they had beers that were super expensive. They had Coors Light. Like you could essentially get whatever. It was something where you could go and you could take anybody and they would be happy.
Sure.
Which is exactly what I wanted to replicate.
And so how does that evolve to where we are now then?
So I took over this location about 3 months after I started. And
so
then
you came just to 10 bar.
I was just a bartender.
And then you took over the whole bar, managing it.
And then I took over as GM.
It's nice for me because I didn't know how. All I knew was Kyla's like, come in and visit me because I'm running the program now. And of course, I think we just ran here. So I've only been here once before, and that was the time. And now I look back, and fortunately, she was working behind the bar that night.
Yep.
Because I don't think we'll get that much anymore, right?
I'll still come in and make you drinks, Christina, anytime. So I took over after about 3 months, and then I opened Pigtails downtown 6 weeks before the COVID shutdown.
And you haven't been, right? I haven't been yet.
I have
either.
not.
Okay.
How similar is it to this in terms of aesthetic?
It's very similar. The only thing is that it's smaller. So like what I always tell people is like if you took a chainsaw down the middle of the bar and just kept the front half of the bar that we're facing, so it's just like 12 seats on one side, and then instead of these big booths, there's smaller 4-person booths, but then there's like a couple big ones up front, and then what we call the queen booth in the back, which is about the same size that we're sitting in now, but it's about half the size of this bar. So it's very small. It's only like a 48-person capacity.
Do you have a food program there as well?
Yep. Actually, what's cool is that the chefs of both Pigtails are married.
Oh, really?
So the chef up here, Chef Mikey, is married to Chef McKenna from downtown. And so then they together did the Coabana menu that we just launched.
Okay.
So that's really cool. They're a really, really great team. I don't know if you have seen the kitchen yet, but it is incredibly small. And like the type of food that they pump out from the tiny kitchens that they've been given.
And you're talking about this one here, right?
Just both of, really all of them. They're all really, really small kitchens.
Is that one even smaller than this one?
Yeah. The one
really?
downtown is
Okay,
smaller.
Yeah.
But down there, you walk in through the kitchen. So like you walk in and it looks like an East Coast like fish market, to where it's like a big white subway tile.
Interesting.
And then there's like the trays for the seafood. And then you see like an ugly gray like plastic swing kitchen door with a neon sign that says cocktails up top. And then you walk in and you're in a very dark bar, just like where we're sitting now.
One thing I've learned is if you see a sign that says cocktails, that was very deliberately put there. Like they're trying to let you know it's
right.
subtle, but it's still very deliberate.
Well, and what's funny too is like we've quickly realized that speakeasies are awesome, but it can't be like a full speakeasy, right?
Yeah.
It's like people still get like pretty pissed off about it. So like we had that.
Speakeasy inspired.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, okay, so we have to do something to let people know where we are, right? Like at some point, like we don't have to put a sign up that says Pigtails, but there's got to be something that we can like tell people they can look for, you know? Like Rough Rider, for example. Like I remember we got so many negative reviews, and I mean still to this day, negative reviews about how hard it is to find. And it's like, okay, cool. So speakeasy bars are cool. Speakeasy restaurants are not cool.
But I'll tell you, to me, that's the draw, because I heard about it. I knew about it. It was hard for me. I think I had to ask the security guard how to find it. But that makes the reveal, to me, so much more striking.
Well, and it's funny
agree.
too, because
You're kind of wandering, and then you take the elevator down.
It's part of the charm.
And literally, and you know, Ernesto is so picky, and we walked in. We both, I think, just looked around. It is fantastic. And if you haven't been there, I don't even kind of want to describe too much about it. But obviously, it's called Rough Rider because it's the Teddy Roosevelt era. So picture warmth and class and sophistication and coziness. It's a big. How big is that?
It's about 110 seats.
It's funny, the people who would complain about having it be hard to find a speakeasy are the people who would ask for the Holy Melon Balls cocktail with Tito's and then leave a bad Yelp review saying it didn't taste good with the Tito's that they specifically ordered.
I would happen to agree with that, and I think that's a really great tie-in for sure.
So if you have trouble finding it, don't leave a bad Yelp review. Just look a little harder, or ask the security guard.
Just ask somebody.
And
there's somebody
inherent. You're going there because you've heard that it is hard to find.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Like it's built into the part of the reputation now. And I remember like whenever like I'm at a place and like I overhear that conversation, or like when I was here bartending and people are like, wow, this place is really hard to find. I'm like, yeah, we do it to make everybody super thirsty by the time they get here.
Good answer.
And I had a couple people laugh, but then some people were like,
that's not funny.
People were like, well, that's really shitty. And I'm like, I'm not, like, I'm just kidding. I'm very sorry that you had such trouble finding this place, but I'm super glad you're here now, you know, and like try to like, you know, okay, let's just, you know, bring it back to like a positive thing. So
do your regulars in Whining Pig just like look over their shoulders at the people like pacing around trying to find where the bar exactly is?
I think that they come specifically for that. Some of them, they're like, hey, I know at this time Pigtails is going to be super busy, so I'm going to sit over here and watch all these people try to find it.
There's just some guy like at the bar just like looking there completely, looks like he's not even paying attention. He's just like, it's at the end of the hall, and they're like, oh, thanks, guy.
There are a lot of regulars that are just like, they like to look at people and then they watch
point.
them. They watch them like come in and then come back out and kind of like look around. And then they're like, looking for Pigtails? And like, yep, down the hall, past the second bathroom. And it's like, by the time the Whining Pig bartenders get there, it's like a regular's already told them.
That's funny.
So I think they definitely take joy in some of that for sure.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the cocktails here specifically. I feel like there's so much more to dig into, but let's get to the nitty gritty. How do you guys come up with your cocktails? What kind of cocktails are you serving? What should people order when they come in?
So the answer to that is kind of long, but basically what we do is I've talked about the classes and the education. So we tie all that in. So we do one class on the first Monday of every month. And then we sprinkle in a couple of other classes based on like who's coming to town or like who's available. Or if somebody's like, hey, do you think we could do a bitters class? Like, sure. So I'll set up a bitters class. And then what we do in October is then I personally teach a like mixology 101 class as to like how to tie together everything that we've learned. And then what we do is we actually assign spirits to our staff. So if you were a bartender here and I knew you and I was casually asking you what your least favorite spirit is to work with, and you said gin, when assignment time came around, you would be assigned gin. So then you have to get two spirits. So let's say your other least favorite one was vodka. So you had gin and vodka as your assigned spirit. So then you have to present a shaken and a stirred variation of both of those spirits. So let's say you got St. George green chili and botanist. So you'd have to do a shaken botanist, a stirred botanist, a shaken St. George, and a stirred St. George cocktail. And then you're allotted 3 freestyles of whatever you want to present as well. So like if you really like whiskey cocktails, those would be the ones that you would use. Those whiskey cocktails in would be your freestyles. So then we allow everybody like a month of R&D time. I personally attend some sessions, like I'm doing one tomorrow for some Rough Rider staff, and I'll like help them with their cocktails. They R&D with their managers, with their friends, and they get to work on these cocktails. And then we do a week of presentations. So the first week of November will be presentation time. So then you get to present your drink. You present it with a name, fully completed, and a garnish. And then we have like these spreadsheets where like we rate the cocktails, and then I sit down with all of the managers and we pick our favorites, and they're based off of like, okay, we need 5 vodka cocktails on this menu, we need like 6 on this menu, and we have a categorized menu, so it's broken up by the style of cocktail. So at the Pigtails Concepts, they're based off of light and citrusy, fun and refreshing, cool and nerdy, and bold and boozy, and then obviously our favorites and throwbacks that I mentioned earlier. So then we get to pick the perfect cocktail for each category. So it really is like a full collaboration of everybody. So like our prep people participate. This year at Rough Rider, we have servers that are presenting cocktails for the menu. So it's really fun to be able to allow that sense of pride to the staff and really have them take pride in their menu, you know. And it's cool when I get to come in here too, and like I'm listening to them talk about drinks, and a lot of times they're selling drinks that aren't even theirs, you know. Like they're like, oh yeah, the Midnight Train is my favorite cocktail, and it wasn't even one that they made, it was one that their coworker made, but like they loved that drink so much. So it's not just like totally self-serving all the time, but it does create some like friendly competition. Like on this last menu, Rob that I mentioned earlier, who is my assistant, more like a partner, and we each did a cocktail, and they're both gin based, and they are like tied for like 4th and 5th like every go around. So like one time he put his cocktail on the board as a feature, so then I put mine on Instagram, and so it's like it kind of creates this like fun sense of like competition where they're like, who's got the number 5 slot this time, and I'm like, oh, it's Isabel, and they're like, oh man, so then they like push their cocktail, and so it's kind of fun to see that as well and just create some friendly competition. But overall it just is a lot more selfishly control on my end, like control of cost and being able to create like a perfectly balanced menu and being able to curate that. But I'm not the one just sitting here writing menus by myself in the dark and then being like, hey guys, here are all these drinks you have to make, and none of them are yours. You know, it really creates a different culture for these guys, I think, to be able to present their own cocktails.
I remember on my first visit here, you know, of course I was like, Kyla, which are your cocktails? And I remember you telling, let's start with, and it was somebody else's cocktail. She's like, it's so good, you have to try this. And so I immediately got that collaborative spirit on my first visit.
Yeah, which I think is great. And it really has been proven to be very successful for us. And it just kind of makes the team happy to be here, you know?
Well, not too many people have a specific culture in mind of the place that they want to work with or that they want to create. People maybe intuitively think like that and they'll seek out places accordingly, but you know, I don't think too many people are making notes of how they might do that. And I think that's a pretty incredible way of doing it, because it just has so many benefits, but it also seems like it would be a massive time and money investment as well. But you know, when you're using that to churn out great cocktails and have your employees more engaged and whatnot, it's a level of doing business where, you know, maybe it costs more up front, but over the long term, it's going to ensure that you guys have better cocktails on the board and that people are selling your cocktails with a passion and not, like you just said, you know, someone made them in a dark room and it's just focused on cost. It's so much more than that.
And it builds trust, too, I think, in the guests.
Sure.
You know, they, like you talked about curating, we all trust that whatever we have here is going to be good. And even this highball, you know, when we talked about a cocktail for the podcast, I love that you picked something that has 2 of my favorite local ingredients. And if you want to share that.
Yeah. So before I do that, though, I do just want to say that it's actually more cost effective the way that we do things. And I will briefly explain why. So when I did take over the program, I was still wanting to do those presentations. But I did present quite a few cocktails myself, and I did plug in a lot of my own cocktails shamelessly on the menu at the time. And then when I was looking at P&Ls, I was noticing that a lot of the cocktails that were being rang in. So we have, the way that we do it here is like if you order Fortaleza tequila and you want it as a margarita, we have an upcharge button. So it looks like Fortaleza tequila and the cocktail upcharge button. So instead of seeing cocktails that were perfectly costed out so that we would make money off of them, right? Like they're not obviously all based on money, but you want to find that perfect balance of like all the best quality ingredients and like good margins for your drinks. So I was noticing that there were a ton of spirits with the upcharges. So instead of having like perfectly well thought out costed cocktails, people were just making bartender's choice cocktails here. So instead of, you know, just letting them kind of make whatever they want, which they still do get to do bartender's choice. Like, hey, you know, I made this cocktail 6 months ago and we're 6 months into the new menu and I'm bored, so I want to make something else. Like, absolutely. Like, we love to give people the autonomy to be creative. But I will say that it is more cost effective the way that we do things now, because now I can kind of figure out what I want to give people. Like, you will be assigned a certain spirit, not just gin, and it will be cost effective, but also something that we want to program, you know, based on the quality as well. So it actually is easier for us to control that cost based on the way that we do things now, like versus the other one where, you know, so that is a proven theory, and not only the reason why we do what we do, but a part of it as well.
Sure, absolutely. And a very important part.
Absolutely.
Christina, you were talking about the 2 ingredients in this highball.
So we have our Copper City private barrel pick. So it's a private barrel that we did. I did personally with John, the owner, which was super cool. It's aged in Cabernet casks. It is cask strength, just like all of our other ones. And then I topped it off with some of the Big Marble dry lemon tonic water, which is my absolute favorite.
Yeah, I'm slightly obsessed.
It's so good. It
has Jamaican spices in it, but they as rowdy as they are, they don't overpower the tonic either.
Yeah, it's like super bright.
Yeah, and very complex. And
Well, and somehow, even though my ice cube has halved in size, it still has no lack of flavor. It doesn't taste watered down at all, and it's very smooth, and it goes fantastic with the bourbon that you have as well.
And the owners, people might know them as they own the Breadfruit and Rum Bar.
Yes.
And then during...
They do ginger beer as well,
yes,
correct?
and their ginger beer is fantastic too.
Yep, so we carry both of those, and they actually just launched their lemon tonic, I want to say a couple months ago, but I am thoroughly obsessed as somebody who, you know, people are always like, oh, what do you make at home? It's like, I make something with tonic water, whatever I'm feeling with tonic water, you know. I've just shaken drinks for 10 hours, and then I don't want to go home and shake more drinks. It's the last thing I want to do. But also, I just love, you know, bubbly, crisp, refreshing. It's just something about it. You know, I love summertime, and it tastes like summertime, no matter what you put in it. So
my favorite drink right now is a mule with tequila in it. And my favorite place to get it is Cornish, because they have the most like spicy version of it, like the ginger spice. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And it's not obviously quite like this, but it's in the same realm of, like, if you're not putting too much stuff in it, it's just bright and refreshing and citrusy. I love that. Let's take a quick break real quick, and then we'll jump right back in. Real quick message for you guys. If you guys are enjoying today's episode, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our email newsletter for all of the cool spots to eat and drink around town, as well as upcoming events and fun stuff like that. Also, we've got some brand new merch on our website, including these Thanks for Supporting Local hats and 2 brand new t-shirts. So make sure to check out our website for more. Now back to the podcast. We've talked at length about Pigtails and, you know, your other concepts, Whining Pig and whatnot, but we haven't dug too much into your new concept. So without going too deep into it and removing a future episode from our lineup, talk to us a little bit about what your new spot is and what people can expect there.
Sure. I know Christina and I have been like wanting to talk about it since you got here, so I'm excited to talk about it. So Coabana is a Cuban cocktail bar. The space next door to downtown Pigtails was supposed to be like 3 different things, and then it's remained vacant. And then we got the opportunity to put a concept in there, and we were debating on if we wanted to do something that like expanding Pigtails, or and we decided that Pigtails downtown is one of our most successful locations. It does incredibly well. We have a great team down there, and they're just busy all the time. Like, it does very well. And we didn't want to lose that by making it bigger.
Sure.
Right? Because it would take away part of the charm that makes it, because it is very small. So then we thought that it would be better to make it something that's the polar opposite, right? So Pigtails is kind of like dark and dusty, like I said. Not dusty, like physically dusty. We clean it, but you know, just like dark, dimly lit. And then we wanted something like super bright and vibrant. And one of my business partner was like, you know, let's put a tiki bar in there. I know you love tiki. And I was like, I do love tiki, but I'm also very good friends with the Ashers, and I don't want to compete with them, nor could I compete with the level of tiki-ness that is Undertow. You know, those guys do a great job. Yes, exactly. There's no way I could ever compete with that. So we were trying to think of, so then I started looking at what is around and what is not necessarily lacking, but just what's not out there. And I was like, you know, there's really no like Cuban cocktail bars or even restaurants, really. There's like a Cuban bakery, I think, in Glendale, but really there was just nothing that was truly based on like that culture. There's been like a couple like Caribbean restaurants that definitely give like a nod to the Cuban culture, but not something that's based on that culture specifically. So then started researching and found the name that I liked. It means the good place in the native language of Cuba. Looked it up, and there was one place in Kentucky that had the same name, but they were close. So I was like, okay, we're good. So we went with that name.
Nice.
And then
Spoken like a true business person.
yeah, I can't have these cease and desist
Your
letters
due
coming 3
diligence
months. Yeah,
first.
right. I can't. Exactly. So then we settled on that. And we're like, all right, cool, we're doing it. So then the next step was going to Miami. So we did a work trip, quote unquote work trip.
Yeah, I feel like this was all just to
Yes.
schedule a
I just really want to go there.
tax-deductible Miami
Yes,
trip.
exactly. So we went to Little Havana. So basically the whole team from Pigtails Downtown, like the management team, which is all females, which is awesome. So Ashley, my general manager, Samantha, our AGM, and McKenna, our chef, and her husband, Mikey, because they did the menu together. So all of us went to Miami together. And I remember telling Mikey, I was like, you know, you're going to be going to like Miami with a bunch of like bartenders, right? And he was like, I've thought about it and I'm ready. I was like, all right. So we all went. And honestly, we had such an amazing time. We were really transported into like a different time and like era and just culture. Like I'd never experienced anything like that, truthfully. And it was really, really cool. And all the places that we went, we just loved everything. And it was really cool because, you know, we'd all like done all this research, and where the research was helpful, none of it was like realistic. Like I remember researching a bunch of like food and drinks, and the drinks down there were nothing like what I had read about or experienced. So
As far as like traditional Cuban cocktails
exactly,
and food.
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, obviously, like there were like the mojito and like the Cuba Libre and all that kind of stuff, but like I'd never heard of like a Veradero punch before, and like things like that were on almost every menu, and really just like the culture of everything that we experienced down there was what made us feel so inspired. So then when we came back, we were so inspired. We had so many ideas. And I think what's really cool is it may sound like a form of like plagiarism, but it was almost like we took our favorites, like our favorites list, like our favorite foods and our favorite drinks, and recreated them in our own way. And that's like what Cowabunga is.
Okay.
And what was cool, so we had our friends and family. We did a 3-night friends and family extravaganza, I will call it. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we did 3 different nights of friends and family. And then what was cool is I had so many amazing compliments from people. And this isn't like shameless advertising. It's more just like hearing people kind of reiterate.
Feel free to shamelessly advertise.
Right.
So, no, but like I had somebody say that that the Cubano sandwich that they had was better than ones that they've had in Miami, which is a
Really?
huge
Wow.
head nod to Chef McKenna and Chef Mikey for everything that they did there. But then people said that they felt like they weren't in downtown Phoenix. And that was
Transported.
exactly,
Right.
yes. And I was like, that's exactly what we wanted. And that's where like an even bigger nod goes to my business partner, Matt, because he handles pretty much all of like the aesthetics and the design. We have an in-house construction team, so we built everything from the ground up,
Really? Wow.
including the bar. It's a beautiful space. Like, and I'm not saying that as a biased party. Like, it really is a beautiful, beautiful space. And he did a great job in all of that. So I work with a really amazing graphics designer. His name is Dylan, and he was a huge help in developing the concept as far as like research and
Oh, really?
design.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Matt and his interior designer that he's worked with, and then me and my graphics designer, and then we kind of collaborate on like the aesthetics and like the theme, because we do focus heavily on making everything cohesive, right? It's like, you know, we can't have you can't have like these beautiful pieces of art on the wall and serve an amazing Cuba Libre and a really amazing Cubano and be playing like hip hop, you know?
Sure.
So we have like a Cuban style playlist. So we try to make it super immersive.
I'm disappointed if you don't have a man in a fedora just playing guitar in the corner of the room.
You know, it's pretty small, but I might be able to squeeze him in there somewhere.
You know, Kyla's like,
No, you're not wrong. You're not. It was definitely cool to be like when we were in Miami, because I have followed Cafe La Trova for a long time, and they won like one of the best bars at Tales of the Cocktail. And like I've listened to podcasts from Julio Cabrera, and like a lot of like I modeled our mojito to the way that he makes his mojito. So like we use like actual fresh sugar, not just like simple syrup. And we do like the ango on top, and like we make it the traditional way, which I don't say is the Cafe La Trova way because they make it the traditional like Cuban way, but we try to make it super traditional, right? It's like, how can we make a good mojito? Like, you really can't. All you can do is make it authentic, and that makes it good in itself.
Sure.
But then we got to go.
It's going to be good, of course, but there's not too much you can play with it to make it different. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, we could do like a clarified mint syrup, or we could do like, how do you make it unique and modernized? And it's like, I think that's the one drink that you kind of can't. So we did like a build your own. Yeah. So we kind of did like a build your own in the sense that like, if you wanted to, like if you're a tequila drinker and you're going to a rum bar, or like let's say like you go in like with your girlfriend and your girlfriend doesn't drink rum, it's like you can get a mojito with tequila. So we have like the build your own where it's like you can kind of just pick your own base spirit, Sure. So that's kind of the most unique that we went with it, but we try to keep it pretty traditional.
And so the grand opening is when exactly?
It's today, actually.
And today is
the 24th.
Yes. So by the time this comes out, it will be open. Things will be rolling. You should definitely go and visit. Before we wrap up this episode, is there anything else you wanted to chat about?
No, I think I just want to say I'm super happy to be a part of this podcast. It was the first one I've ever done, so it feels nice to be with people that I'm comfortable talking to, especially Christina. It's kind of cool to sit here with Christina. No, I mean, you're super cool. Don't worry. We did a really fun photo shoot together. We're friends.
Yes.
But, Christina, I remember, like, when I met her, I was, like, just starting out, and I was like, oh, my God, it's Christina, that really cool writer. Like, she's here. She's going to, like...
I'm the other way. I'm like, who is this person? I'm so impressed.
I was so intimidated because I was just like, oh, my God, she's going to take my picture, and she's going to ask me about my drink. I'm going to start, like, sweating. So it's cool. It's cool, like, to sit here with her and, like, talk about this kind of stuff because she's really kind of been there since, like, day one and kind of, like, watched my journey, not in, like, a and look at me now kind of way, but it's just really cool.
No, it is because you are shaping Phoenix. Like, it's so neat to, see her so enthusiastic about things and competing in competitions and blowing everybody away. And now you're part of the food and beverage industry in Phoenix that is putting it on the map. Like, that is just so amazing. So
I really appreciate that.
I probably should have opened up with this, but you are in our Cocktail Kingpins article in the magazine as well, recognizing kind of what you're speaking to, Christina.
Yeah, and I do just want to say, like, we kind of talked about this, like, during one of the breaks, but I just want to say that, like, it's definitely not, like, a one-woman show, and I know that I have been featured a lot in magazines, which is super, super cool, and I'm very grateful for all of the, fame and fortune, but truthfully, like, I would not be where I am without my amazing partners or even like my day-to-day partners, like my managers. Like, we all operate as a team, and in reality, they are the ones that are making this place so successful. It's like I give them the tools and like they build it and make it look beautiful. So I'm very, very grateful for the team that I have behind me.
Absolutely. Well, with that said, come on in here to Pigtails and grab some cocktails, grab a bottle to go. Check out your guys' new spot. I'm going to let you say the name again so I don't mess it up.
Coabana.
Which it means what again?
It means the good place.
The good place. And it definitely sounds like that. So, Christina, I'm sure you and I are as excited as each other to get down there and try some stuff. Maybe we schedule a podcast for there in the future to dig into it a little bit more. Absolutely. And maybe bring on one of your team members and talk about kind of their perspective on it. But thank you so much for sitting down with us. We will definitely have to revisit for maybe some more educational episodes because I feel like we could probably talk for hours.
Educational.
I could definitely ramble for sure. So,
well, we will definitely get you on to ramble sometime soon. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
And thank you for joining us, Christina.
Thank you.
Cheers.